I'm Janie, a single mom and software engineer in Chicago, the one who always keeps family gatherings running smoothly without a complaint. For my son's birthday, I poured my heart into making it unforgettable at the local ice rink. I sent invitations, got promises from my parents and brother, and even followed up to be sure. But when the day arrived, they were nowhere to be found. No call, no text, just broken promises. My son looked up at me with wide eyes and said, "It's okay, Mom, just you and me is enough." That shattered me, but I swallowed my anger to keep his smile alive. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. No apology for bailing on us, just a demand for $1,800 per person to attend my brother's wedding at a swanky Chicago hotel. The nerve of it made my blood boil. They couldn't bother to show up for my son, yet they expected me to bankroll their big day. I didn't argue or explain. I grabbed an envelope, slipped in a single dollar, scribbled "We won't be attending," and dropped it in the mail. Slamming that mailbox shut felt like snapping a chain I'd carried my whole life. But that $1 unleashed a storm. 2 days later, a police cruiser pulled up. My father standing beside the officer, arms crossed, face carved in stone. In that moment, I knew this wasn't over. What they did next pushed me to my breaking point, and this time I refused to let them trample over us again. Has your family ever let you down when it mattered most, especially for your kids? Share your stories in the comments. I'm listening. Stick around because what happened next changed everything. After the sting of that betrayal faded, I couldn't stop replaying how it all began. Growing up in Chicago, I was always the afterthought in my family. My brother was the golden child, the one they pinned all their hopes on. I can't pinpoint when it started, but it was obvious early on that he got everything while I was left to scrape by. My mother, Carol, orchestrated it all. She had a talent for twisting every situation to her advantage, making you feel small if you dared to question her. When I struggled to afford community college, she brushed it off, saying they needed to save for my brother's future. He ended up with a full ride, tuition, books, even a car to drive to his prestigious university. I worked nights at a diner, juggling classes and bills, my dreams buried beneath their priorities. Meanwhile, they bought him a condo downtown, calling it an investment. I was lucky to get a used laptop for school. My father, William, wasn't much better. He never challenged Mom's decisions, just nodded along, signing checks for every one of my brother's whims. Whenever I brought up the unfairness, he'd shrug and say, "That's just how it is." It hurt, but I kept pushing, determined to prove I didn't need their help. I taught myself to code, clawing my way into a tech job in Chicago's fast-paced scene. Every late night, every rejection, every small victory was mine alone. My brother, Sean, soaked up their attention without question. He never saw the favoritism, never noticed me struggling. They financed his ventures and his flashy lifestyle, while I pieced together a life for myself and my son. At family dinners, Mom would gush over him, bragging about his latest deal, while my achievements earned little more than a polite nod, if that. It wasn't just about money. They controlled every conversation, every decision, making sure I never forgot my place. Then there was my Aunt Janet. She was different, quiet, observant, never fooled by Mom's manipulations. She'd pull me aside at gatherings, whispering, "You're stronger than they think." Her words stayed with me, a lifeline when I felt invisible. She lived across town, keeping her distance from the family's drama, but I knew she saw through their facade. Looking back, I can see how they kept me tethered to their expectations. They'd guilt me into helping with family projects like planning my brother's events while dismissing my own needs. Once, I needed a small loan for a medical bill, but Mom said they were tapped out after buying Sean a new car. I paid it off myself, working overtime, my resentment simmering. It wasn't only about money. They controlled my emotions, too, making me feel like I owed them just for existing. Every family gathering was a stage, Mom performing, Dad agreeing, and Sean basking in the spotlight. I was the one cleaning up, organizing, playing the dutiful daughter while they plotted his next big moment. Slowly, I began to see the pattern, how they dangled approval just out of reach, keeping me desperate to earn it. But I wasn't blind forever. Each slight, each dismissal built a fire in me. I moved out, got my own place in Chicago, and focused on raising my son. I wanted him to grow up knowing he was enough, unlike me, always chasing their validation.
Still, I kept some hope alive, thinking maybe they'd change. Maybe they'd finally see me. That hope died the day they skipped my son's birthday. It wasn't just a missed party. It was years of being pushed aside, of being told I didn't matter. Sending that dollar wasn't just an act of defiance. It was me drawing a line. I was done playing their game. The real shock came when I realized they weren't done with me. What they did next pushed me to a breaking point I never saw coming. While my brother had everything handed to him, I was struggling to build a life from scratch. Chicago's tech scene was booming, but I started with nothing. No degree, no connections, just a burning need to make it for my son and me. I'd always loved solving puzzles, so I taught myself to code, hunched over a secondhand laptop after bedtime stories, stealing hours from sleep. Online tutorials became my lifeline, each line of code a step toward freedom. I juggled waitressing shifts, diaper changes, and late-night study sessions, my eyes burning, but my resolve unshaken. My family never offered a hand. Mom and Dad poured everything into my brother, buying him a brand new car to celebrate his first business venture, a startup they funded without hesitation. I was still riding the bus, stretching every dollar for my son's school supplies. When I landed my first freelance coding job, I called my mother, hoping for a hint of pride. She brushed it off, saying my brother's latest deal was the real news. That dismissal cut deep, but I turned it into motivation. Every rejection stung. Tech firms skeptical of a self-taught single mom. But Chicago's startup grind rewarded persistence. I worked in coffee shops, pitched myself at meetups, and slowly built a portfolio. Each contract felt like a small victory, proof that I didn't need their support. My son's laughter in our tiny apartment kept me going, his faith in me louder than their silence. Meanwhile, my parents financed my brother's every whim. They paid for his storefront lease, his flashy marketing campaigns, even his new condo when his business supposedly needed stability. I asked for help once, a small loan for my son's preschool tuition. Dad said they were stretched thin from my brother's latest project. I worked extra gigs, covered it myself, and swore I'd never ask again. The contrast was glaring. They'd attend my brother's ribbon-cutting ceremonies, smiling for photos, while I got one-word texts for my milestones. My mother once called my coding cute, as if it were a hobby, not a career lifting us out of debt. Their favoritism wasn't just financial, it was emotional neglect, a constant reminder that I was less in their eyes. Still, I kept pushing. A tech startup eventually hired me full-time, impressed with my grit. I moved us into a better apartment overlooking Chicago's skyline, a view that reminded me daily of how far I'd come. My son started school, and I began saving, determined to build a life they couldn't take credit for. Yet their indifference still stung. At one family dinner, they toasted my brother's brilliance while I cleared the plates, invisible. My aunt, sitting quietly, slipped me a note. "You're doing it right." Her faith bolstered mine. I thought I could keep the peace, stay connected despite their slights. I kept calling, inviting them to my son's school events, hoping they'd show. They rarely did, always citing my brother's obligations, his business trips, his galas, his endless excuses. I swallowed the hurt, convincing myself I'd built something stronger. My career grew, my confidence solidified, but their rejection left scars. I wasn't chasing their approval anymore, but I still couldn't let go. I wanted my son to have family, to know something beyond their coldness. That hope kept me tethered, even as their favoritism festered. When their next move came, I was ready to fight. The fallout from that single dollar hit harder than I expected when my doorbell rang. Standing on my doorstep was my father, William, beside a Chicago police officer, his expression carved with disapproval. The officer, badge glinting under the porch light, held up my envelope, the one with that lone dollar inside. Dad claimed I'd sent it to humiliate my mother, Carol, accusing me of defamation. My pulse raced, but I steadied my voice, explaining it was a response to their demand for $1,800 after skipping my son's birthday. I showed my mother's text, her cold message demanding payment for my brother's wedding. He read it, gave a short nod, and handed the envelope back. "This is a family matter," he said, tipping his hat before walking away. Dad stood silent for a moment, then turned and left without another word. I thought that would be the end of it, but my family wasn't finished.
When the school's annual sports day arrived, I was there cheering for my son as his little legs raced across the field. The air buzzed with excitement, parents laughing, teachers shouting encouragement, kids running everywhere. Another discovery revealed my mother diverting funds to an account tied to my brother's failing business. The trail of deceit was clear. This wasn't just about control, it was fraud. I contacted a lawyer, sharing what we'd uncovered, and she confirmed we had enough evidence to begin building a case. Aunt Janet kept investigating, uncovering more inconsistencies, her determination matching mine. One evening, my son came to me quietly. "Why don't Grandma and Grandpa want to see me anymore?" he asked, his voice small and searching. My heart broke, but I knelt beside him, keeping calm. "Sometimes people make bad choices, but that doesn't mean you're not loved," I said, pulling him close. "You've got me, and I'll always be here." I reminded him of our life together, our coding projects, walks along Lake Michigan, and the laughter in our little apartment. His smile returned, hesitant but genuine, and I promised myself he'd grow up free of their toxicity. My lawyer warned that exposing their fraud would take time, but every new document strengthened our case. My aunt and I worked in secret, knowing that if my parents or brother caught wind, they'd retaliate. Their attempt to take my son wasn't just a power play, it was desperation. But I was done bending. As their lies unraveled, I was ready to fight back. By the time my brother's wedding lights glittered, I had a plan. The glitz of his Chicago venue, a sprawling, chandelier-lit hall, masked the web of deceit my aunt and I had uncovered. Armed with emails and invoices, I filed a lawsuit against my parents, accusing them of financial misconduct tied to the $1,800 wedding demand. My lawyer, sharp and unyielding, presented our evidence: inflated vendor contracts, suspicious bank transfers, and an email from my mother directing funds to my brother's struggling business. The truth was undeniable. They had been skimming money under the guise of wedding expenses. I tipped off a local Chicago reporter I'd met through my tech networking days. She jumped at the story, digging deep into the paper trail we'd provided. Days later, a front-page article hit the stands, exposing their scheme: family wedding or financial facade. The headline blared, detailing how my parents inflated costs to funnel money to my brother. Social media erupted, locals calling out the extravagance of the venue, a glittering contrast to their claims of financial strain. The article quoted an anonymous source, hinting at family favoritism, and I knew it was only a matter of time before someone cracked under the pressure. That someone was my brother. He called late one night, his voice low and strained. "I didn't know how far Mom went," he confessed, admitting he'd been blindsided by her manipulation. He'd trusted her to manage the wedding finances, only to discover she used his name to disguise her dealings. Furious at being used, he forwarded me a chain of emails, damning proof of her directing vendors to inflate invoices for kickbacks. "I'm done being their pawn," he said, regret heavy in his tone. I didn't fully trust him, but those emails were gold, strengthening our case beyond question. In court, my lawyer presented the new evidence, laying out a clear pattern of deceit. The judge, unimpressed by my parents' flustered defense, issued a preliminary restraining order, barring them from contacting me or my son. My mother's face twisted in outrage as she left the courtroom, my father trailing silently behind her. My brother didn't attend, but his email spoke louder than any testimony. The order was a victory, a legal shield protecting my son from their reach. The fallout was swift. What was meant to be a grand celebration turned into a scandal. Guests whispered about the article, and vendors began backing out, citing payment disputes. My parents tried to spin the narrative, claiming I had fabricated everything out of spite, but the evidence was airtight. My aunt, my unwavering ally, texted me, "You've turned their game against them." Her words reignited my resolve. Though I knew my parents wouldn't stop, their pride was wounded and they would strike again. The courtroom win felt like a turning point, but the cost was heavy. My son, too young to understand, sensed the tension around us. I kept him close, shielding him from the gossip now swirling through Chicago's tight-knit circles. My focus was protecting him, not just from their schemes, but from the heartbreak of watching their family fall apart. The lawsuit wasn't about money anymore. It was about breaking free from their control. With their facade crumbling, their next attack came online. After the wedding fell apart, they took their fight to social media. My mother, Carol, unleashed a barrage of Facebook posts, portraying me as a vindictive daughter who had sabotaged my brother's big day. Her words dripped with venom, accusing me of fabricating lies about their finances to destroy the family. My father echoed her on Twitter, retweeting her tirades and adding his own jab. Some kids forget where they came from. The comments multiplied. Distant relatives, old neighbors, even strangers chimed in, calling me ungrateful. My phone buzzed nonstop with notifications, each one a stab at my resolve. Then came the direct messages. Mom sent a private note demanding that I pay the $1,800 wedding fee to make things right. She wrote, "Send the money or you're no daughter of mine." My father followed with a text warning that I'd be cut off for good if I didn't comply. Their threats hurt, but I wasn't the frightened girl they once dismissed. I documented everything, every post, every message, and forwarded it to my lawyer. This wasn't a family spat anymore. It was a calculated effort to intimidate me into submission. I remained silent online, refusing to engage. My Aunt Janet called with calm assurance. "They're digging their own grave," she said, urging me to stay focused on the lawsuit. We'd already built a strong case, and my brother's emails had sealed it. In court, my lawyer presented the social media attacks and messages as evidence of harassment, stacking them atop the financial misconduct we'd uncovered. The judge's face was impassive as she reviewed the screenshots, my mother's accusations glaring from the projection screen. My parents sat across the room, their composure unraveling. The ruling came swiftly. The court issued a permanent restraining order, prohibiting my parents and sibling from contacting me or my son. The judge cited their pattern of intimidation and ongoing financial deceit, her voice firm as she read the decision. My mother's eyes flashed with defiance, but my father stared blankly at the floor. My brother, absent from the hearing, had already distanced himself, his wedding canceled amid the scandal. The once-booked ballroom stood empty, a hollow monument to their collapsing lies. The fallout was brutal. My parents' reputations, already shredded by the earlier article, took a final blow. Mom's employer, a local nonprofit, dismissed her after donors questioned her integrity. Dad, a small-time consultant, lost clients who'd seen the online chaos. Their social circle evaporated. Friends stopped calling, relatives withdrew. My brother, his wedding plans destroyed, withdrew from Chicago's spotlight, his ventures collapsing without their support. I didn't celebrate their downfall. That had never been my goal. I only wanted to protect my son and free us from their control. My aunt sent a message. "You stood your ground."
Her words steadied me, reminding me I wasn't alone. I kept my son sheltered from the online storm, deleting apps to spare him the cruelty. When he asked why we no longer saw Grandma, I told him that some people choose anger over love, but we would always have each other. His small nod told me he understood, and that was enough. The legal victory lifted a weight off my shoulders, but the scars remained. Chicago's rumor mill churned, yet I focused on my work, my son, and the quiet life we were rebuilding. Their online attacks had backfired, exposing their desperation to anyone watching. I had won more than a court case. I had reclaimed my peace. Once their venom faded, peace finally found me. Once the dust settled, I found peace in our small world. Our Chicago apartment, warm with my son's drawings pinned to the fridge, felt like a fortress against the chaos we'd left behind. I had climbed the ranks at my tech startup, earning a promotion to software engineering manager. My days were filled with leading a team, solving intricate problems, and mentoring coders who reminded me of myself, driven, self-taught, and hungry to prove their worth. The skyline view from my office window stood as a daily reminder of how far we'd come, from scraping by to thriving on our own terms. Meanwhile, my parents and brother faded into the wreckage of their choices. My mother, Carol, and father, William, struggled to rebuild after losing their jobs. Their once close social circle had dissolved. Neighbors avoided them, and family gatherings dwindled into silence. My brother, his wedding plans destroyed, withdrew from Chicago's spotlight, his ventures collapsing without their support. Through my Aunt Janet, I learned they now lived modestly, their lavish habits reduced to memories. I didn't wish them suffering, but their absence brought relief. My son no longer asked about them. His world was full of school projects and soccer games. My aunt remained my anchor, her calls a steady reminder of loyalty that didn't demand repayment. We often met for coffee, her gentle smile easing the lingering ache of betrayal. She'd say, "You built this life, not them," and I'd nod, knowing she was right. My son and I found our rhythm, weekend walks along Lake Michigan, coding games before bed, his laughter echoing through every corner of our home.
The restraining order held firm, an unbreakable wall keeping their shadows at a distance. Looking back, I learned hard truths about family. Some bonds are harmful, not sacred, and recognizing that truth saved us. My parents and brother had chosen control over love, their manipulation and deceit a burden I refused to bear. Protecting my son became my compass. Every decision, from blocking their calls to standing in court, was for him. Independence became my freedom. Each step I took alone proved I didn't need their approval to stand tall. To anyone listening, I'd say this: know when to walk away from those who wound you. Guard what matters most, trust your strength, and build a life worth living. Those lessons carried us through, and they'll carry you.